Welcome back. You have just tuned in to Women's AM. This morning, I'm joined by Sister Nusrat, Sister Habiba Allahi, and we have another special guest on the line, Susan Seenan, who is the Chief Executive of Infertility Network. Assalamu alaikum, Susan. Welcome to the show. Good morning. Susan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi,
Good
Susan.
morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When I introduced you, I was saying that you're the Chief Executive of Infertility Network. So can you tell us a little bit about your organisation, just very briefly?
Yes, I can. Infertility Network is a national charity, and we're here to provide information, advice and support to anyone that has a fertility problem. And we do that in lots of different ways, through having staff across the country, running support groups, and obviously through our online presence as well. Because it's very important that people who are going through fertility problems actually have somewhere to come when they need support.
Yes, absolutely. And getting that information and feeling that you have that support, I can imagine is very valuable for people that are going through the treatment. And I look forward to hearing more about your work in the discussion. So now let's get straight to it and to her views, where today we are discussing IVF. There are few roles more sought after or more honoured and revered than the role of a mother. The desire to have children is one that largely transcends barriers of race, class and religion. But what about the couples who cannot conceive naturally? This can put immense strain on a marriage and leave both the wife and the husband feeling unfulfilled and sometimes even desperate. IVF can seem like the perfect solution to this problem, but is it for everybody? And what is the reality of this highly invasive treatment? If you would like to join the discussion, please do so. You can call the studio on the number which is on your screens now, or you can tweet us at Islam Channel, #WAM15. So, Susan, I'm going to come straight to you to kickstart this discussion. I think, first of all, we should really ask the question, what is IVF and who exactly should be considering this process?
Problem may find that they will benefit from IVF. Basically, IVF is a procedure which helps a couple to conceive, and it does so by taking the sperm and the eggs, the sperm from the man and the eggs from the woman, putting them together in a Petri dish and waiting to see if they actually fertilise. Once fertilisation is taking place, the embryos are replaced back into the uterus, ideally one at a time, to ensure the best possible outcome of one healthy pregnancy with no risk of multiple births. So anyone with fertility problems, perhaps blocked fallopian tubes, problems with their sperm count, or problems with perhaps the mobility of their sperm, can benefit from IVF treatment.
Okay, and this is something that's available on the NHS, but obviously subject to waiting lists, etc.?
It's available on the NHS, but the sad reality is that it depends where you live. Right. There is national recommendation for couples to be able to access up to 3 cycles of IVF treatment. In England, in particular, the reality is that it depends where you live, because the local clinical commissioning groups make their own decisions as to how many cycles and indeed whether they will provide IVF or not. So anyone who is thinking that they might need help to conceive needs to actually check what the provision is in their particular area. Okay,
that's interesting, and that's very useful advice, I'm sure. We have a caller on the line. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Walaikum salam.
Welcome to the show, and Jazakallah for calling in. I understand you've got a comment or a question for the panel?
Yeah, I've been the process because I suffer with infertility.
Right.
And I've been trying to conceive since I got married, basically since I was 21, and now I'm 40. So I've been in the process throughout, having all these variety of treatments through the NHS.
Yeah.
And as you know, the NHS is very, very slow in terms of getting the process through. But the reason why I rang in is you've just got somebody there talking about IVF treatment.
That's right, yeah.
Whether it would be appropriate for myself, because I feel sometimes all relevant tests are not done, and you just put through, yes, you should have the IVF treatment, because I'm a person who's got unexplained infertility.
Right.
And people have got this misconception that as soon as we have IVF, at the end of the day, once, like one of my doctors said, I'll press a button like a drinks machine, you'll get a baby at the end of it. But
oh goodness,
in reality,
that's not really the reality of the situation, is it? Jazakallah for for calling in to share your experiences, and inshallah I pray that you're kind of blessed with a child or whatever Allah has planned for you at the end. Sister Habiba, you must be able to relate a lot to the caller's dilemma there.
Yes, no, definitely. Was I right in hearing that she's been married since she was 21 and now she's now 40?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So it's been a long time,
a long journey,
and alhamdulillah, my husband and I didn't have to wait that long. We didn't wait that long for various reasons and circumstances, but IVF is sort of like a last resort if all else is explained. I mean, and like the sister who rang, I had unexplained infertility as well, so it was a case of, well, there's no rhyme or reason as to why it's not happening. It's just qada from Allah, well, we just came to the conclusion that Allah's got a different path for us, more, but then there's no harm in trying as well at the same time. Like there's that very familiar hadith about tying your camel. Yes. So inshallah, so we take the steps to doing what we can, and then Allah will do the rest.
I think it's also important to remember not to actually despair, because some people think that if they can't have something a certain way, then that's the end of it. No, there are other ways you can do so. And if IVF is not possible or unsuccessful for any reason, you can even try even adopting as well. So you can still try a variety of methods. It's just that method that maybe, for whatever reason, Allah has willed it a different way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. As you said, there are many different avenues, and I think it's about us accepting whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained for us as well. Sort of kind of not pinning everything onto this one process, inshallah. Susan, I want to come back to you now. We're talking a little bit more about the process. So can you tell us a little bit more about what actually happens and how long does it take?
Yes, of course I can. The answer to how long it takes really depends on the couple, because it is a very, very individual process.
Yeah.
But in general, what happens is the woman would take some drugs to firstly downregulate her system.
Yeah.
And then she would take some different drugs which actually helps her to ovulate and make sure that during the process she does actually produce some eggs, and that can take 2 or 3 weeks. At that point, when she has produced sufficient number of eggs, they will be extracted and put in the Petri dish for the sperm to be fertilized with the eggs. That takes perhaps 2, 3, sometimes up to 5 days, and then, all being well, hopefully a single fertilized embryo would normally be replaced high up into the woman's uterus to help maximize the chances of it being successful. And after that, it's a straightforward 2-week wait to find out whether you've actually been successful and you are pregnant. And actually, for a lot of people, that can be one of the hardest parts, that very, very long 2-week wait.
I can imagine that waiting game must be kind of very, very emotional. And obviously, Sister Habiba, you've kind of been through this, so you can obviously relate a lot to what Susan was saying in terms of how the process takes place. How did you feel when you were kind of going through that?
Ups and downs, really. Been through it twice. Alhamdulillah, it worked the second time, but as I take it, one of the lucky ones, really. And obviously, it depends on age, the statistics which you can get on the internet and from the NHS website. But I think one thing that I have to say is that nothing can prepare you for what you are about to feel and undergo in the next 2 to 3 months in order throughout the cycle, basically. So support is paramount in this instance, and support ultimately from your partner. Because they are going through this with you, and they need to understand and support you and guide you during this time, because you just can go a bit doodally, especially with the hormones that you have to inject yourself.
Absolutely,
I don't think people realise that, yes, you are given drugs, but you actually have to give them to yourself, and they have to be given via injection.
So you have to inject yourself on a daily basis?
You have to inject yourself on a daily basis, the hormones, in order to suppress your cycle, as Susan was saying initially, and then to boost your egg supply after that. And then also, you also have to go through multiple ultrasounds to make sure that everything's chugging along nicely. And then during the egg collection as well, you have to be sedated in order for them to retrieve the eggs. So that's a mini operation in a way. And then you've got the hormones racing around, playing havoc with your ability to think rationally, logically, emotionally, deal with everyday situations.
Yeah, and I think the emotional side of it as well is quite. It's obviously a very emotionally charged situation. When you hear things like our caller mentioned a doctor saying, you know, press a button like a drinks machine and a baby comes out, you know, that's pretty an insensitive thing to say, and also an unrealistic thing to say.
Very unrealistic. I think you also need to not only you need to face facts and say, yes, it is hard. There's nothing wrong with saying that. There's nothing wrong with saying it's hard and I'm finding it really difficult. And also, I think you also need to consider the other people who are going through this journey with you, which is your partner, with your husband, but also maybe your family members that you're telling, because this is a potentially exciting time for them as well. They want this as much as you do, to a certain degree. You've got to think of it from their point of view, because the first time that we did the cycle and it failed, I was like, fine. Okay, alhamdulillah, whatever Allah wills, fine, you know, get on with it. But when I turned to tell my husband the result, the look on his face, didn't expect that, and that's what made me just break down and cry, because I didn't realise, yeah, fine, I'm dealing with it. This is a test from Allah, and I'm getting through it, inshallah. But it's also a test for everyone else around you who's involved.
And I think you forget that, don't you? When you're going on the journey, you become quite blinkered.
You do.
What about, for example, people going through it who actually have, for example, one child already? How is the process in terms of the patients and generally the whole emotional aspect of it? How would that be? For example, if you live with extended family, for example.
I think it's important to educate your extended, or the people that your mother, your father, your siblings, if you're going through this, to educate them on what's going on, because I don't think they can fully, to be honest, you can't fully understand what's going on until you're going through it.
I think the emotional side is quite an unknown, isn't it? But what about the kind of, you know, the practical things to consider, you know, like the financial side or the success rate, that kind of thing?
Whenever you're going into any kind of treatment, IVF or whatever, you have to have a level head. So the practical considerations you would need to think of as well is finance as well. Do you need to be saving up in advance for this? Do you already have money set aside? If not, how are you going to actually set money aside and ensure that you can keep up with the regular payments and treatments? So that's something to consider. The success rate and its impact. The success rate can be dependent on your age, and statistically speaking, the older you get, the chances may be slightly lower. And that's according to the NHS in 2010, actually. They said that the percentage of IVF treatments that resulted from a live birth was 32.2% for women under 35, and it considerably got lower, and for women who are aged over 44 it was 1.9%. And this is also coupled with lifestyle factors as well. If you're for example smoking, consuming alcohol and not maintaining a healthy lifestyle, this is obviously going to affect
so these are factors that we kind of have to consider. Susan, just a quick comment from you. What's your experience of people's expectations of the practical side of this treatment? Are they generally well prepared for it?
Not always, no, and that's one of the things that we try to emphasise. There's a lot of things that you can do, which have already been mentioned, like, you know, following a healthy lifestyle and a healthy diet. Tempering your expectations around about success rates, because people do have an expectation that it will work. And the reality is, as we know, it doesn't. On average, it's probably around about 25% success rate.
Wow, that's actually pretty lower than I thought it was.
It is, but it's higher if you're younger, as we've already mentioned, and of course it's much lower the older you get. So one of the things that we always say to people, it's really important, if you think you have a problem, to go and see your GP early. Because the earlier you're diagnosed, the better, and the more successful treatment is likely to be. And also, if you hope to have several children, then the earlier you're treated, the better. And don't be fobbed off by your GP if he or she tells you to go and just keep trying for a few years, because sometimes you don't have that few years.
That's absolutely true, and that's a really, you know, a really good reminder, and I think a good place to pause this conversation, because unfortunately we do have to go for our first break. But don't go far, as when we return, we'll be asking about the man's role in the IVF decision and giving you some advice. Before we go, here's a reminder of this week's competition.